Hey guys, tonight we're heading back over 5,000 years to a land of cracked clay, wandering goats, and bureaucrats in linen skirts. You're in ancient Sumer, specifically somewhere near the city of Uruk, where the air is thick with heat and the scent of baking mud. The reeds sway lazily beside irrigation ditches, and in the background, someone is loudly counting livestock again. You're not a king or a warrior tonight. No. You're someone far more essential, an observer to the invention of receipts. Yes, you're about to witness humanity's first flirtation with organized paperwork. And you probably won't survive this, because even one full hour of barley inventory would knock out the average time traveler cold. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. It's fun seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a dusty courtyard, avoiding a lazy ox swatting flies with its tail. To your left, someone kneels beside a shallow basin, smoothing out a soft slab of clay. The sun hasn't even risen properly yet. No one sane does accounting after breakfast in Sumer, but already the scribes are at it. Because when the gods demand a count of temple goats, you count. Or else. There's something faintly magical, no, sleepy, about how it all begins. A lump of clay, a sharpened reed, a series of wedge-like marks pressed in while the material is still damp. You lean in. It looks like a child's doodle. But that row of symbols? It's not art. It's a record of 37 measures of barley owed by a man named Urdumu to the temple granary. It is, by all sleepy definitions, the world's first receipt. Historians still argue whether writing was born from storytelling or accounting, but here in the temple courtyard, there's no doubt. The very first written language, cuneiform, wasn't crafted for poetry or myth. It was born out of sheer logistical necessity. Someone needed to remember who gave what, when, and how much of it needed to be returned. Civilization's grand debut, a grocery list on a brick. You follow the scribe, a man with permanently clay-streaked hands and the posture of someone who has slept beside a ledger since childhood. He's making tallies, little pictographs that start as simple images, a triangle for a measure of grain, a wavy line for water, and a headless chicken-looking thing that may or may not represent livestock. He mutters to himself, 3 sheep, 1 cow, 8 handfuls of dried figs. His assistant follows behind, occasionally correcting him with a grunt. You can't help but feel a gentle wave of respect. It takes real commitment to get this excited about legumes at dawn. What's astonishing is that these records are more than tallies. They're part of a larger network of control. The priests need the grain counted to perform rituals. The temple needs to know what surplus to trade. The gods, allegedly, need their cut too. So every item gets logged. And unlike modern receipts, those irritating curled-up paper snakes you find at the bottom of your purse or glove box, these receipts are designed to last. The clay, once inscribed, is dried or even fired in kilns. You're holding a piece of bureaucracy that could survive for 5,000 years. Somewhere, an accountant weeps with joy. You move through the temple storehouses, stacked with rows of sealed jars and baskets of goods. Nearby, a team of scribes is hunched around a massive ledger tablet. It's wider than a man's torso and likely weighs more than the cow it's recording. They pass it around like a holy object, muttering about someone failing to return a load of fish last moon. There's a quiet pride in how methodical they are, and a distinct lack of flair. This isn't history's great drama, it's history's nap time. Still, in its way, it's powerful. The Sumerians didn't just invent writing. They invented the idea that you could trust a little symbol on a rock more than a man's memory. A revolutionary idea, tucked inside the world's most boring to-do list. The light shifts as the sun crests the horizon. You're beginning to nod off already, lulled by the soft scraping of stylus against clay. Nearby, an apprentice drops a tablet face down in the dust and panics. His supervisor sighs and remakes the entire thing without a word. The original is ruined, after all, and this grain loan isn't going to document itself. As you drift farther into this gentle labyrinth of ledgers, you realize that ancient Sumer may not have had electricity, or the internet, or even paper. But what they did have was deadlines. and forms to fill out, and clay-stained fingernails from doing it all before the rooster crowed. It's oddly comforting, knowing that even 5 millennia ago, someone was losing sleep over misplaced sheep. You sit under the flickering oil lamp glow of an early Sumerian temple chamber, and the air smells faintly of warm clay and overripe dates. You've got yourself a front row seat to the first office job in history, and it's just about as thrilling as you'd expect. The man across from you doesn't notice you, of course. He's hunched over his work with a single-minded focus. His reed stylus taps rhythmically against a tablet, making little dents with careful deliberation. A pot of water sits nearby to keep the clay damp enough to inscribe. His hair is pulled back with a strip of linen, and his eyes, though bleary from lack of sleep, scan the records with the haunted gaze of someone who knows they'll never escape barley. You're in the service of the great goddess Inanna's temple, and tonight's task is vital: reconciling barley payments from a small farming village whose oxen are tragically unmotivated. Each farmer owes a certain amount of grain to the temple. The scribe's job is to record who's paid and who's tried to cheat by delivering damp sacks full of chaff and weevils. You peek over his shoulder. There it is. Urkala has tried that trick again. Damp barley, half rotten. That's going on record. To call this tedious is an understatement, but it's also oddly beautiful. The Sumerians had no paper, no pens, no QuickBooks. Yet here, with nothing but earth and water and a borrowed reed, they created accountability. The humble receipt became a kind of social glue, ensuring fairness in a society where memory and word of mouth just wouldn't cut it. The scribe pauses. Outside, you hear the distant bleating of a goat, probably waiting to be counted. He rubs his temples and sighs, then shifts to a second tablet. This one records temple expenditures: oil for lamps, beer for the priests, fresh reeds for, well, more receipts. It's a recursive nightmare of stationery. Here's the fringe detail. This entire system was maintained not by accountants, but by a priestly class. These scribes weren't just bookkeepers, they were holy functionaries. Writing itself was seen as sacred. Every tally, every symbol had a divine weight to it. You're not just counting beans here. You're offering up small prayers in wedge-shaped ink. And there's a rhythm to it. Tap, 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 press, slide, like a prehistoric typewriter without the clatter. The clay tablet in his hands becomes a slow, sleepy metronome, ticking you further into drowsiness. Historians still argue whether these temple scribes understood themselves as inventors of something monumental, or simply clerks following orders. There's no eureka moment etched in the clay. But what you can tell, watching the furrowed brow and calloused fingers of this man, is that writing changed him. His job isn't to fight wars or build monuments. It's to make sure no one forgets what went in and what didn't. Your gaze drifts across the chamber. Stacked against the walls are baskets full of tablets. Some are dried in the sun. Others are waiting to be fired in kilns. A permanent record. Nothing gets tossed. Sumerians are, in a word, hoarders. You'd be hard-pressed to find a discarded note or accidental scribble. Every scrap of cuneiform matters, and it doesn't stop at grain. You spot another scribe across the room, half dozing against a tablet inscribed with a list of tools: bronze sickles, fishing nets, ceremonial combs. The temple doesn't just count offerings, it tracks its own inventory. If someone breaks a ceremonial comb, and someone always breaks the ceremonial comb, that too must be noted. There's no escaping the ledger. You shuffle closer to a third scribe, this one younger, visibly bored, and doodling little animal shapes in the margin of a tablet. You spot a long-necked bird, a floppy dog, and, puzzlingly, what might be a llama, despite llamas being utterly unknown in Mesopotamia. The temptation to make art, even during the barley shift, is universal. One sleepy priest walks through the room muttering, "We're still 4 goats short from Nibru," as though announcing the apocalypse. Another pauses at the doorway and says to no one in particular, "If this continues, we'll need another pot of inkless ink." There is no punchline, just the weary drama of divine accountancy. But don't let the monotony fool you. These tablets, dull though they may seem, form the foundation of history. Without them, we wouldn't know when cities rose, when crops failed, or when entire economies hinged on fish paste and beer. Even more surreal is that the same stylus used for barley tallies was later used for poetry. The Epic of Gilgamesh? Born from the same system that tallied sheep, literature snuck in the back door of a barley office. You lean back, listening to the night sounds, the occasional drip from the ceiling, the flutter of birds nesting in the rafters, the gentle hum of voices debating whether a sheep that was traded twice counts once or twice on the records. Spoiler, it depends who you ask. And now you're blinking slowly. Your eyes are heavier than the tablets. The candlelight flickers, stretching the shadows of the scribes across the clay-streaked floor like living hieroglyphs. It's the end of another shift. A priest stands, stretches, and tucks his stylus into his sash like a prized dagger. It's all over. Until tomorrow morning, when the sheep return. You awaken, if you ever really slept at all, to the soft clink of stone weights and the rustle of barley sacks being dragged across temple floors. The air is thicker now, warm with the must of grain dust and incense. A new day in ancient Sumer, and that means one thing: recalibrating the scales. You meander through the market quarter where life hums gently under the sun. Merchants chat without urgency. A woman sells dried fish with the glazed-eyed look of someone who's done this for 20 years. Beside her, a potter shapes wet clay with hypnotic turns of his wheel. But your attention drifts to a quiet drama unfolding at a stall where a farmer, wrinkled, sunburnt, and trying not to sweat too obviously, is negotiating the weight of his grain. Here we are, the original argument over pricing. The buyer, a shaven-headed priest official, squints at the farmer's sack, then reaches for a collection of stone weights. These aren't just any rocks. They're standard units, smoothed and carved, some even marked with cuneiform. 1 mina, 1 shekel, even a rare talent weight. The farmer's face falls. He knows what's coming. You watch as the priest lifts each stone reverently, like he's measuring divine truth itself. He sets them on a 2-pan balance scale, one side for the stone, one for the barley. The grain shifts in its pan, a trickle of golden kernels sliding over the edge like tiny sandy regrets. The weight dips, not in the farmer's favor, he argues, of course. Claims the wind carried some off. Claims his ox had a cold. Claims, with a very straight face, that his wife accidentally fed 3 sacks to a goat. The priest nods sympathetically, then deducts 10% for temple loss. This is more than mere haggling. It's performance, ceremony, bureaucracy, and faith all tangled up like a knotted fishnet. And it works, for the most part. These early systems of weights and measures didn't just keep markets honest, they enforced a kind of cosmic order. Measure well, and the gods smiled. Fudge the numbers, and your fig trees withered. Or worse, you ended up in the temple records under problematic individuals. The quirky bit? Some Sumerian weights were shaped like ducks, literal carved ducks. It's hard to say whether these were meant to be charming or intimidating. Imagine being fined with a duck weight. You'd never recover. Historians still argue whether these measures were uniformly enforced across city-states or if each temple winged it. There's evidence that neighboring towns used slightly different shekels, which led to some spirited debates and possibly the earliest form of passive-aggressive trade diplomacy. One city's mina was another's lawsuit. You slip away from the barley scale, justice has been served with just a pinch of priestly smugness, and wander toward a quieter corner of the market. Here, a young apprentice practices tallying clay tokens. Each shape represents something: a cone for grain, a sphere for livestock, a flattened oval for oil. Before writing proper, these were how deals were tracked. Carried in little pouches, exchanged like primitive poker chips. A goat might be worth 3 cones and a flattened oval, depending on mood and hoof condition. What's odd is how many of these little tokens have been found inside hollow clay balls, sealed envelopes. It's like stuffing your receipts into a piggy bank, then forgetting the combination. Only when the ball was broken could the truth come out. That's right. The first audit trail was a kind of edible Kinder egg of commerce. And these envelope tablets weren't just for show. If a dispute arose, say, someone denied owing 5 goats, they'd smash open the ball and check the tokens. It's weirdly satisfying to imagine a stern Sumerian priest ceremonially cracking open an accounting orb with all the gravitas of a courtroom drama. You pass a group of children playing beside a granary, their game suspiciously resembling hide-and-seek, but with barley sacks. One boy pretends to be a merchant. The others accuse him of underweighing his goods. They've been listening too closely to their parents. You pause for a moment to take it all in. The deliberate pace of trade, the ever-present recording of transactions, the way nothing escapes notice. Not the spare goat, not the extra oil jug, not even the accidental llama drawing from the last section. The temple's role is inescapable. It sets the standards, owns the scales, issues the receipts. No one questions it. The lines between religion, commerce, and daily life are blurrier than a clay tablet left out in the rain. You remember how writing itself began here, not to tell stories or record legends, but to ensure no one skipped their barley dues. Your eyelids droop slightly. The warm air, the scent of grain and oil, the soporific rhythm of weights being placed, lifted, adjusted, all of it conspires to slow your thoughts. You are a whisper in time, a ghost watching the gears of the first economic engine turn. And they turn slowly. Oh, so slowly. But maybe that's the point. In Sumer, patience was currency. Barley doesn't grow faster just because you yell at it. Goats don't fatten from being rushed. And scribes? Scribes take their sweet, sweet time. As you shuffle back toward the temple compound, you pass a storage room stacked with newly inscribed receipts. Clay tablets sit neatly on shelves, each one a silent witness to someone's promise. A goat given, a jug traded, a weight disputed. In the great scroll of time, these are the quiet margins. And yet, here is where history begins. The sun dips lower. The shadows lengthen. A priest snores gently against a wall, a duck-shaped weight cradled in his lap like a very dense teddy bear. You follow the scent of date cakes and the sound of scribes muttering to themselves, past the storage vaults of clay records. The hum of commerce has faded to a duller rhythm now. Less buying and selling, more calculating and recording. You've reached the true nerve center of Sumerian society, the scribe's courtyard. Here, beneath an overhang of woven reeds that offers a modest break from the heat, rows of scribes perch on low stools with styluses in hand, pressing symbols into still wet clay tablets. They look tired. Not "I didn't sleep well" tired, but the kind of existential exhaustion you get from copying the same formula for 3 solid weeks. You settle beside one. His name is Enlil Bani, and he is 13 years old. He's been training to become a full scribe since he was 5. His tablet, about the size of a sandwich, records a transaction between 2 farmers and the temple granary. An exchange of barley, goat manure, and something cryptically described as wet fuel. You don't ask. As he works, you begin to understand the incredible monotony of the job. Cuneiform is no joke. It's not letters. It's little wedge-shaped impressions made by pressing the tip of a reed stylus into soft clay. You need to know hundreds of these signs, and combinations of them too. It's like trying to write a novel using only Play-Doh and a chopstick. But Enlil Bani is precise, methodical. His tongue peeks from the corner of his mouth as he inscribes 2 shekels of barley, given in advance, to the household of Tudia, in exchange for 1 ewe and her future wool. He even adds the temple's little logo in the corner, something between a seal and a brand. You wonder how many of these receipts were ever read again. Most were probably archived, left to harden in dry cellars or placed on shelves never to be touched. But they were important. They represented trust, memory, law. Without them, society would collapse into bickering and forgetfulness, basically your last group project in high school. Still, historians aren't entirely sure whether all scribes were trained the same way. Some believe temple scribes had elite schooling, formalized curriculums, instructors, strict daily drills, while others think many were apprentices who learned by imitation, repetition, and a healthy fear of messing up a priest's taxes. There's evidence of scribal schools, but also of scribes popping up in more rural villages where education likely involved sitting near an older cousin and trying not to break anything. You ask Enlilbani if he likes being a scribe. He squints at you, shrugs, and says, "It keeps me out of the fields." Fair point. Beyond him, an older scribe works on a more complex tablet. This one contains not just receipts, but a narrative, a delivery gone wrong. There's drama here. An ox cart overturned during a flood, barley lost, compensation negotiated. It reads like a novella, albeit one mostly about soggy oats. But this is the precursor to storytelling. True events, frozen in clay. Not quite epic poetry, but the whisper of it. Quirky fact. Some tablets from this era include what are essentially ancient sticky notes, quick summaries scratched in the corner to indicate the contents. One simply reads, "Fish problem." You can only imagine. The sun creeps across the courtyard. Enlilbani finishes his tablet and places it on a drying rack. It'll be baked later, probably in a communal kiln, or just left out in the sun if it's not deemed critical. He wipes his hands on his tunic and picks up a new lump of clay. No break, no reward, just the endless tick of transactions across time. The priest in charge strolls through, occasionally glancing at a tablet, nodding or frowning. His robes rustle with authority. He stops beside Enlilbani, points to a character, raises an eyebrow. The boy blinks, then quickly adjusts a wedge stroke. No word is spoken. The priest moves on. It's the Sumerian version of spell check. You drift to the edge of the courtyard and notice a series of sealed tablets. These are official. Each one bears a rolled cylinder seal impression, tiny images and text pressed into the clay like a logo. Every seal is unique, usually worn like a necklace. They're the signature of their owner, used to prove a transaction's authenticity. No seal? No deal. Some seals depict gods shaking hands with humans. Others show animals hauling goods, or people standing proudly beside a pile of jars. Think of them as business cards mixed with fan art. And, of course, status symbols. Having a fancy seal said, "Yes, I am important. Also, please stop shortchanging me on goat deliveries." Still, scholars debate whether all these records were mainly economic or whether they also served social or ceremonial roles. Were some receipts symbolic? Tokens of allegiance? Proof of divine offerings? One theory suggests the act of recording was as much for the gods as for people, as if saying, "Look, we're doing the right thing. Please don't flood our fields again." You lean against a dusty column and watch the scribes continue their quiet labor. There's something soothing about it. The steady rhythm of stylus meeting clay, the soft murmurs of numerical values being recited like a mantra. Every line they inscribe brings a tiny portion of chaos into order. You think about modern paperwork and suddenly feel a strange respect for these clay-smudged teenagers and their duck-shaped weights. As the light begins to dim, the scribes tidy their stations. The temple bell, more like a hollowed gourd than anything metallic, sounds 3 soft thuds. The workday ends not with a flourish, but with a collective exhale. Clay tablets stacked, styluses cleaned. Tomorrow, the same. You take one last look at the drying shelf lined with tablets like tiny sleeping bricks, each holding a quiet truth. A bargain struck, a promise made, a goat misplaced, a future remembered in clay. You wander from the courtyard, stepping over sleeping dogs and ducking under a bundle of drying reeds, until you reach what might be called the logistics zone. It's quieter here, more motion than sound. Shadows of cartwheels flicker on mud brick walls. 2 boys are arguing over whether 5 baskets of onions equals 1 bolt of linen. You quietly hope this never becomes part of your daily routine. This is where the receipt, the humble clay tablet you just saw inscribed, goes from theory to reality. It's not just abstract numbers or ceremonial fluff, it's inventory control, baby. You're standing near the edge of a vast storage complex. Temple warehouses built to hoard, manage, and redistribute just about everything. Grain, fish, beer, oil, wool, and assorted animals with various degrees of willingness. These warehouses are the ancient world's version of both Amazon Prime and your town's community fridge. A laborer comes trudging by, balancing two heavy baskets of emmer wheat on a pole across his shoulders. He pauses at the gate, where another young scribe checks his delivery against a tablet and waves him through. You catch the word shubati, meaning received. The transaction is complete. Somewhere, a record is drying in the sun, and someone will sleep easier knowing the wheat is accounted for. Historians still argue whether this system was primarily religious or bureaucratic. Was the temple just a sacred storehouse for the gods, or a complex economic hub disguised in divine robes? Some argue the entire Sumerian state was essentially a grain-fed machine managed by priests. Others believe individuals had more freedom, trading outside temple control. You're inclined to believe both, depending on who had the bigger beard and louder voice that day. What's clearer is that this system required astonishing organization. You peek into a warehouse and find rows of clay jars labeled by stylus scratches. Some jars contain sesame oil sealed with wax plugs. Others have dried lentils. One simply smells like regret. Beside you, a clerk named Ninsikala is counting baskets using what looks like a combination of knots and tokens. She explains that for certain goods, especially perishable ones, clay receipts were too slow. So they used a kind of shorthand, string-tied tokens, each with different shapes, stored in a pouch like an accountant's bead collection. Some think these were the ancestors of the written receipt. Others think they were just Sumerian fidget toys. Hard to say. You watch Ninsikala tie a small triangular token to a strand of wool and tuck it into a satchel. She doesn't look up when she says, "If I lose this pouch, I'll have to explain to 7 men why I owe them 10 goats." You wisely back away. Here, finally, is the heart of the system, the temple granary. You duck inside where it's cool, dim, and smells like dusty abundance. Massive bins of barley are stacked floor to ceiling. A boy scoops grain into sacks, measuring with a standard vessel called a gur, roughly equivalent to 300 liters. A senior clerk watches like a hawk, because if someone skims a bit off the top, it could snowball into temple-wide chaos, or at least an uncomfortable inquisition. And yes, even here, receipts are key. Every time grain goes in or out, someone scratches it down. Date, quantity, recipient. Think of it as the original barcode system, only 100% biodegradable and far easier to accidentally eat. One wall of the granary bears a mural showing a feast. Not a religious vision, more like a motivational poster. Work hard, store well, and maybe you'll be invited to the New Year barley banquet. A priest once got so enthusiastic during that feast, he reportedly danced into a torch and set his robe on fire. The gods presumably were amused. You pause by a scribe recording the day's totals. His tablet reads, "On the 7th day of the month of rainfall, received from the field overseer, 4 gur of barley, 2 jars of beer, 1 robe, worn." You raise an eyebrow at the last item. The scribe shrugs. "It's better than cold." You can't argue with that. Scholars have long debated whether these receipt records were enforced by real legal consequences. Some think they held genuine weight, like court evidence. Others argue they were more about ritual and memory, preserving the illusion of fairness in a world where fairness was relative. The truth is likely somewhere in between. But the system lasted, and it evolved. That's no small feat. A quirky twist. In some areas, debts could be transferred by physically handing someone a receipt tablet. It's like Venmo, but with heavier pockets and clay crumbs. Imagine saying, "Hey, I owe you a goat. Here, take this brick." And occasionally, receipts had margins filled with curses. Soft ones like, "May you lose count of your figs," or "May your stylus snap mid-symbol." Sumerian sarcasm ran deep. Back outside, the sun is dipping. Shadows stretch across the plaza. A man with a long beard, possibly an auditor, possibly just lost, wanders through, muttering numbers under his breath. You imagine him waking up in the middle of the night screaming, "3 gur unaccounted for!" His wife gently pats his arm. "Shh, dear. We paid that debt to Lugal 2 moons ago." You chuckle softly to yourself. In this world of complex rituals, meticulous records, and suspiciously familiar anxieties, one thing is clear. Bureaucracy is eternal. As night edges in, temple workers light shallow oil lamps. The flickering light dances on clay tablets still drying on the racks. The receipt, the little tablet you watched take form this morning, is now stiff, permanent. and officially part of the ancient record. Someday, it might crumble into dust. Or it might be dug up by a wide-eyed archaeologist, 5,000 years later whispering, "Ah yes, one goat, slightly damp." You stretch your limbs, and for a moment, everything feels still. The barley is stored, the tokens are tied, and every transaction is at peace. For now. Dawn creeps back across the baked clay bricks, and the city of hums to life like a tired merchant unrolling his mat. You follow the scent of something warm, maybe bread, maybe optimism, and find yourself in a different district entirely, the Riverside Market, where trade happens not by divine decree, but by everyday haggling and, yes, more receipts. It turns out Sumerian receipts weren't just the domain of priests and grain counters. Ordinary citizens, bakers, fishmongers, brewers, and even wandering salesmen with dubious amulets all kept records too. And if you think customer service today is annoying, try settling a dispute when your receipt is a sun-baked brick with a smudged wedge and an owl doodle in the margin. A woman named Datura is selling flatbread near the canal. Her stall is nothing fancy, just a reed mat and a few pots, but she has a clay tablet tucked under a jar, just in case someone claims they paid yesterday. You ask if this happens often. She rolls her eyes. Every market day. Some guy always says, "I gave you 2 shekels already." So I say, "Show me your tablet, pal." Her tone implies they usually can't. This leads you to the broader question. How do people without access to temple scribes handle record-keeping? The answer lies in the growing class of independent scribes for hire. People who roam the city with styluses tucked into their belts, ready to inscribe your legal or commercial woes onto a handy little rectangle. Like notaries, but dustier. One such scribe, a man with ink-stained fingernails and what appears to be 3 missing teeth, lets you shadow him for a few hours. His name is Etel P. Shamgi, which translates loosely as he who writes and also complains. His first client of the morning is a woman named Kubaba, who wants to sell her goat Hamu. The goat bleats disapprovingly. Etel Pishamgi carefully writes, "In the month of the boar, Kubaba transfers ownership of 1 goat, with patch on left leg, to Lugal kin for 2 shekels and 1 loaf of barley bread. The goat, naturally, receives no copy. Historians still debate whether these private receipts held equal legal power as temple-issued ones. Some scholars argue that if the scribe was known and respected, or intimidating enough, his record would stand in a dispute. Others point out that without temple backing, enforcement could be shaky. Then again, sometimes all you needed was enough witnesses and a loudly declared curse. Etel Pishamgi grumbles as he signs the tablet with a stylized wedge. "I once had a client try to pay me in pickled onions," he mutters. "The receipt still smells." As you wander deeper into the marketplace, you notice how receipts shape more than economics. They influence memory, reputation, even family life. One man brags loudly about a tablet proving he donated wool to the temple during a drought. His wife chimes in, "He only did it because they promised free beer." The husband shrugs. Still counts? Another receipt, proudly displayed in a brewer's tavern, reads, "To Namtarbeli, 4 jars of barley beer, aged, for the New Year's festival. May his hangover be mild." You realize these little clay slips are more than bureaucratic clutter. They're the social glue of the city, preserving not just trades, but stories. Some even double as IOUs, or boastful trophies. There's one hilarious example in the city archives of a man who gifted a neighbor 1 unremarkable chicken and demanded a receipt in return. Why? Possibly out of spite. Possibly because it was Tuesday. Back near the edge of the market, you watch a ship unloading goods from upriver. Wooden crates of copper, lapis lazuli wrapped in linen, and bundles of dried fish. One crewman clutches a particularly long tablet covered in names and tallies. You get the sense this was no casual exchange. These are long-distance trade receipts, the ancient equivalent of customs declarations. Historians still argue whether these far-reaching receipts imply a centralized trade network or loose affiliations of entrepreneurial families. Some tablets suggest organized supply chains. Others suggest chaotic free-for-alls with the occasional fistfight over miscounted ducks. But one thing is clear. Without receipts, long-distance trade was a gamble. With a good tablet and a reputable witness, you might reclaim that missing cargo of obsidian next season. Without it, well, hope you like fish. A quirky twist you overhear from a young girl weaving a basket. Some wealthier families commissioned receipts as part of dowries. Imagine getting married and being handed a set of clay bricks that say, "Here's your land, 4 goats and 10 jars of pickled leeks. No refunds." And in one particularly unusual case, a merchant left behind a series of receipts with sarcastic annotations. Things like, "Yes, again, Lugal. You bought another magic charm. It does nothing." You sit on a stone bench, soaking it all in. The shuffle of sandals, the creak of ox carts, the dry wind off the river. Everything here runs on the quiet authority of little clay tablets. The system's not perfect. It smudges, it breaks, it sometimes gets eaten by goats. But it works. You imagine a world where every receipt tells a story. Some are proud declarations: I gave, I built, I married. Others are reluctant admissions: I borrowed, I lost, I owe. And through it all, the scribes keep writing. As the sun begins to dip behind the temple roofline, casting gold onto the cracked streets, you realize something quietly profound. These people aren't just building a civilization. They're documenting one, transaction by careful transaction. And if civilization is just a collection of promises made and kept, then the first receipt might just be its heartbeat. As dusk settles over the dusty courtyards and fluted walls of Ur, the market stalls fold away like tired flowers. You stretch your legs, shake off the scent of fish and sun-warmed wool, and follow a line of oil lamps twinkling down toward a less bustling part of the city. Here, in the shadow of the ziggurat, sits a building you hadn't noticed before. It's quiet, dignified, and, judging by the old man nodding at the entrance, very important. You step inside what feels like a public office crossed with a library and a maze. Rows of clay tablets line niches in the walls. Some are tiny and chipped. Others are hulking slabs that look like they might crush a man's foot if dropped. Welcome to the Sumerian Archive Room, the central record-keeping hub for Ur's business, temple, and civic life. The atmosphere is hushed, almost sacred. You half expect someone to shush you for blinking too loudly. A scribe in dark linen, probably someone's uncle who knows too much about barley quotas, leads you between shelves of shelved tablets. Each tablet is stored with a baked tag, sort of an ancient Dewey Decimal Code, a brief note with the tablet's date, subject, and issuing party. The organizational system? Rudimentary, but methodical. We separate them by year, then by purpose. Trade, legal, temple, the man says. And then alphabetically, if we feel ambitious. He chuckles at his own joke. You smile politely. It's been a long day. You ask if they've ever lost a tablet. His smile falters. Oh yes, sometimes misfiled. Sometimes borrowed and never returned. And once, during a rainstorm, the roof leaked. He doesn't finish the sentence, just looks mournfully at a cracked ceiling tile. Still, it's impressive how much information these early bureaucrats kept. There are records of land sales going back 40 years, invoices for temple repairs, logs of priestly diets. One tablet from a century ago just says, 30 bricks missing from Eastern Gate. Suspicious. Historians still argue whether these archives were meant for legal recourse or just for show. Some believe the mere presence of the archive created a sense of accountability. Others point out that literacy was limited, and the threat of being recorded might have been more deterrent than actual. A fringe theory suggests these archives also functioned as training sites for young scribes. Hence why some tablets are hilariously misspelled or wildly inaccurate. One tablet, clearly scribbled by a beginner, reads, 2 goats, maybe 3, given to someone. You're handed a sample tablet. It's heavier than expected. The cuneiform wedges are small, tidy, and mesmerizing. You run a finger gently across the symbols and realize, this isn't just data. It's texture, labor, permanence. 1,000 years from now, this receipt might still exist, long after Hamu the goat has bleated his last. The archivist beckons you into a side room, less orderly, more cluttered. He calls it the backlog. There you find fragments and misfits, half-burned receipts, unbaked clay still soft to the touch, and mysterious tablets that no one's yet translated. One bears a perfectly sculpted ear in relief, likely part of a legal dispute or ritual. Another has a small doodle of a lion with very sad eyes. Sometimes, the archivist says, scribes got bored. You believe him. Some tablets in this pile deal with household expenses. Laundry services, lamp oil, a recurring entry simply marked cheese emergency. A few are marked with curses, just in case someone steals or tampers with them. One ends with the ominous line, "May Enlil smite the dishonest borrower with 1,000 sneezes." You sneeze involuntarily. He raises an eyebrow. You find a particularly curious tablet buried under a stack. It's shaped like a small cylinder, etched in spiral form around its sides. The archivist explains it's a foundation document, a record buried beneath buildings to commemorate construction. This one praises the king for donating bricks and warns future rulers. Disturb this tablet and may your walls fall down faster than your reputation. It's also signed with an impressively large royal seal, basically a flex. Historians still wonder how often these tablets were actually consulted. Were they regularly referenced, or mostly symbolic? It's possible most citizens never laid eyes on their own records again after filing them. And yet, there they were, stored with care, aging in the dark, whispering stories to any curious wanderer with time to read. The archivist shows you the section for taxation disputes. Here, you discover receipts written not by scribes, but by angry landowners themselves. They're sloppy, emotional, and often use more adjectives than necessary. To the temple of Nana, I did indeed give 2 measures of millet, and if you say otherwise, you're blind as a bat and your beard is uneven. Nearby, another section houses communal fines, mostly minor. Things like failure to maintain a clean irrigation ditch, or letting a goat wander into a sacred pond. Apparently, goats were a consistent legal concern. Before leaving, you spot one last artifact, a receipt carved on a tablet shaped like a fish. The archivist grins. Ah, yes, the Fishermen's Guild had a sense of humor. This one certifies delivery of 12 fish and 1 eel that looked suspicious. You're not sure if that's about the eel's behavior or the fisherman's honesty. You step outside just as the stars begin to pierce the darkening sky. The clay streets are quiet now, just soft footsteps and the occasional bark echoing through the alleys. Behind you, the archive keeps its vigil, hundreds of years of debts, gifts, trades, and promises, packed into tiny wedges of thought and clay. It strikes you, as you breathe in the cooling air, that these receipts weren't just records. They were the city's memory, durable, literal, and unblinking. The Sumerians may not have invented fire or farming, but they sure figured out how to remember. And in a world of shifting sands, that might have been their most important invention of all. Your sandals tap softly against the baked earth path as you move away from the archive, and toward a scent so sweet it seems to hover in the air like music. Honey, dates, roasting barley. You follow the trail until you find yourself in a residential quarter where smoke curls lazily from rooftop ovens and people are settling in for their evening meals. This is dinner time in ancient Sumer, and tonight you're invited. A matronly figure, bare-armed, eyes sharp, flour dusting her elbows, waves you inside a modest, flat-roofed home. It's dim but cozy, with oil lamps flickering against clay walls. You duck slightly to enter. The ceiling is low, and there's a gentle buzz of flies near the doorway, though no one seems to mind. You're sat on a reed mat. Around you, the family bustles. One child grinding flour with a stone quern, another blowing gently on a fire pit, and someone chopping garlic with surprising intensity. The mother, your host for the evening, slides a shallow bowl toward you. It's filled with something thick, golden, and warm. Barley stew, spiced with onion and crushed leeks. Floating in the broth, chunks of goat meat and, yes, that's lentil. You sip it slowly. It's hearty, comforting, and slightly grainy, like soup made by someone who thinks texture is flavor. There's also a round, flat bread, charred around the edges, served hot from the oven's wall. Mainstream historians agree that the Sumerian diet was primarily grain-based, barley especially. Wheat was more delicate, so barley did most of the heavy lifting. They made beer out of it too, naturally. In fact, your host pours you a thick, frothy mug of it now. It's opaque, yeasty, and has what one might call a chewy mouthfeel. There's no polite way to drink this. You tilt the mug and sip like a champ. The flavor is earthy, but it grows on you, probably because your options are limited. Bread and beer, the father says, wiping his mouth. That's what built the world. And he's not wrong. Most workers were paid in bread and beer. It was daily wage, daily ritual, and daily comfort rolled into one. Scribes even had shorthand for beer entitlement, a little symbol that looks suspiciously like a mug with arms. Historians still debate whether beer was consumed mostly recreationally or nutritionally. Some suggest it was safer than water. Others say it was simply too delicious to pass up. A fringe theory argues Sumerian beer brewing was a way of preserving grain surpluses, turning something perishable into something, well, mildly intoxicating. The meal continues. Someone brings out skewers of dried fish. Another hands you a paste of mashed dates and crushed nuts. Dessert, they claim, though it looks like something scraped off a temple floor. You take a bite. It's astonishingly good. Sweet, rich, almost like fudge but with a rustic edge. One daughter opens a small pouch and sprinkles coriander over everything. The father teases her gently. Think you're a priest now? She ignores him. You notice a small clay container of salt at her side. It's been stamped with a symbol, the family's mark perhaps. Even condiments have status. Then comes the after-dinner ritual, storytelling. The children gather around their grandmother, who leans forward with a theatrical groan, the way all grandmothers do when they're about to make you sit through something long but rewarding. She tells a story about the gods arguing over whose temple roof is better. Then one about a shepherd who tricks a demon with a loaf of bread and a smile. Somewhere in the middle you realize, this is the entertainment, the television, the wind-down. Food, beer, and stories. Not a bad rhythm, all told. One of the sons asks if you've ever seen a ziggurat kitchen. You blink. There's such a thing? Oh, yes, the grandmother says, waving her spoon. Those priests eat better than kings. She's right. Temple kitchens were staffed with dozens of cooks, brewing specialists, bakers, and fish cleaners. They maintained vast storerooms filled with dried fruit, spices, meat, and more. Clay receipts recorded exactly how many loaves went to which god on which feast day. And not just generic loaves. There were over 30 types of bread, from thick and black to fine and white to something delightfully labeled wavy bread. Modern scholars are still trying to decipher what wavy means in this context. Curved? Rippled? Mood-enhancing? A quirky side note. One surviving receipt lists 120 sheep delivered to a temple, followed by a vague line, plus or minus a few, as if the gods were feeling flexible that day. Back in the home, the children grow sleepy. The oil lamps burn lower. You help clean up, or at least pretend to. The family laughs at your clumsy reed broom technique, but appreciates the effort. Someone hands you a warm cloth to wipe your hands. It smells of ash and lavender. You step outside once more. The stars are clearer now, the streets quieter. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then stops, probably realizing it's too late for drama. Behind you, the family settles in for sleep. Their routine, simple but rich, plays out night after night. Eat, drink, laugh, rest. In the heart of the world's oldest cities, people found comfort not in kings or temples, but in the warmth of shared stew, in the rustle of a reed mat, and in the soft, sleep-bound sigh of someone nearby. You wake, or rather, drift, from your barley and beer-induced haze, and find yourself walking beneath the soft gray light of an early Sumerian morning. The air smells faintly of ash, cooked fish, and damp reeds. A pale mist clings low to the ground, curling around your ankles as you wander back toward the heart of the city. You're heading to a workshop this time, specifically a scribal apprentice house, where young, slightly anxious Sumerians practice their cuneiform writing and learn the bureaucratic dark arts of ancient record-keeping. And today, you're going to sit in. Inside, the place is dusty. Scrolls of clay tablets line the walls, organized on rough wooden shelves that look like they'd collapse if you even sneezed near them. A group of boys, aged somewhere between 10 and 16, squat on low stools, hunched over wet clay squares. One is muttering the signs for grain shipment. Another's chewing the end of his stylus like it owes him money. You join the class. Your teacher, older, sunburned, and built like someone who has argued with donkeys, is introducing today's lesson. How to fudge numbers convincingly without offending the gods. That's not an official title, of course, but you're getting the sense that accounting here is part mathematics, part theology, and part interpretive dance. Mainstream historians confirm that Sumerians had an incredibly advanced system for accounting and taxation. They invented one of the earliest positional numeral systems. The sexagesimal, base 60 system, in fact, still lingers in how we measure time: 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. The boys scrape out numbers using clever wedge-shaped impressions. One, proud of his work, holds up a tablet labeled 240 jugs of sesame oil for the temple kitchens. It's crisp, symmetrical. The teacher nods, then drops it on the floor. The tablet shatters. "You forgot the witness mark," he says flatly. "Start over." You wince. So does the boy, but it's all part of the process. The Sumerian scribal school, called Eduba, or tablet house, was not for the faint of heart. Lessons started early and ended late. Mistakes were punished, often physically. A fringe theory suggests the phrase "school of hard knocks" may have literal Mesopotamian origins. Though modern scholars argue over the exact methods, tablet records contain complaints from students about canings, punishments, and tyrannical teachers who made them copy the phrase "I will not talk in class" for hours. You glance at the stylus in your hand. It's a humble thing, just a carved reed, split at the end. But it wields surprising power. These kids aren't learning to doodle. They're learning how to communicate with gods, manage state resources, and most importantly, keep receipts. Literally, in one corner of the room, a teacher shows off a baked clay tag with a hole punched through it. It's threaded with string and has a seal rolled across it, raised pictographs of a merchant's name, and a tally of fish traded. It jingles slightly as he shakes it. "First receipt ever," he says proudly. "For 1 fish, 2 onions, 1 flirtatious goat." You assume that last item is a joke, but then again, you've seen goats in this city. Anything's possible. Historians still debate whether these early receipts were purely economic or held ceremonial weight. Some argue that temple offerings were more symbolic than transactional, meant to curry divine favor. Others insist that, yes, the gods expected proper documentation. It wasn't enough to sacrifice a bull. You had to log it, stamp it, and file it with the divine equivalent of HR. A fringe detail: some receipts include symbols for returned item or refused by recipient. Apparently, even the gods sent things back, possibly goats. By midday, the room smells like sweat, clay, and roasted chickpeas, someone's lunch. One student is asleep on his scroll, which earns him a light slap from a passing scribe. Another has scribbled a poem in the corner of his receipt tablet, a little love note to someone named Inanna, with a flower and a rather hopeful heart symbol. You smile. Some things never change. The teacher pulls you aside and shows you the master ledger, a series of larger, thicker tablets stacked carefully on a reed platform. These are the records that matter. They track city imports, temple donations, surplus grain levels, and, amusingly, festival beer rations. There's even a line that translates roughly to "extra rations for priest who danced too long." Apparently good performance got rewarded. You're allowed to touch one. It's warm from the sun and surprisingly smooth, like river stone. Your fingers trace the indentations, every wedge a whisper of thought from 4,000 years ago. Someone sat here, just like you, worrying about whether they'd used the correct sign for oxen rental or accidentally ordered 12 more than needed. Outside, the call of the temple gong signals the afternoon break. The students pack up, some careful, some careless. One boy tucks his stylus into his belt like a sword. Another grumbles about clay in his fingernails. They file out into the heat, chattering, arguing, already forgetting half of what they learned. But you linger. Something about the quiet weight of the records holds you here. The idea that entire lives, births, trades, deaths, Arguments over lentils were written in these little marks. No ink, no parchment, just stylus to clay. You pocket a tiny practice tablet with your name on it. You're not sure how long it'll last in your world, but here it might have endured 1,000 years. As you step back into the sun, it's hard not to feel slightly taller. Not because you've learned anything world-shattering, but because now you can read the shadows of lives long gone. And maybe, just maybe, someone like you once sat on the same stool, scratching symbols into clay, dreaming of lunch and legacy in equal measure. You stroll through the bustling marketplace just as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows between the narrow mud brick stalls. The air is fragrant with spices, fresh dates, and the occasional waft of drying fish, mingling in a curious perfume that you come to recognize as unmistakably Sumerian. A slender woman with a basket of glossy pomegranates catches your eye. She smiles faintly, her hands deftly selecting fruit as she chats with a fishmonger, whose stall overflows with shimmering carp and catfish from the nearby rivers. You pause to watch a man carefully unwrap a bundle of reeds, intended for weaving mats, you learn, and a boy offers you a sample of sweet cheese made from the milk of local goats. This marketplace is not just a place for trade, it's a window into everyday life in ancient Sumer. The Sumerians were some of the earliest known urban dwellers, with bustling cities like Uruk and Ur hosting tens of thousands. Markets like this would have been noisy, colorful, and full of vibrant stories. The daily hustle wasn't just about commerce, but community, a lively dance of bartering, gossiping, and sharing news. A mainstream fact? Archaeologists have uncovered clay tablets listing goods sold and prices, showing a surprisingly sophisticated economy with items ranging from textiles to luxury perfumes made of rose and myrrh. Trade extended beyond the city walls, reaching distant lands through the famous silk routes, connecting Sumer to Egypt, the Indus Valley, and even Anatolia. Quirky tidbit. Merchants sometimes carried seals with images of mythic creatures, griffins, dragons, and hybrid beasts, to authenticate their goods. These stamps doubled as early brand logos, and, according to some scholars, acted as magical talismans to protect merchandise from theft or spoilage. Historians still debate how much of the trade was state-controlled versus independent enterprise. Some argue temples dominated commerce, effectively running the economy, while others believe private merchants flourished alongside religious authorities, making the marketplace a melting pot of both sacred and secular interests. You meander past a spice vendor whose wares include ground cumin, coriander, and a pungent powder said to cure insomnia. He offers you a pinch to sniff. The sharp scent stings your nose, but somehow feels grounding. Insomnia, of course, was a common complaint even then, and remedies often mixed ritual with herbal knowledge, a hint that ancient people had their own gentle battles with restless nights. Nearby, a potter shapes clay into jars decorated with geometric patterns, humming softly as his hands coax the vessel into being. You imagine the daily rhythm here, the weaving of human effort and ritual, commerce and community, each trade a small pulse in the city's heart. As twilight deepens, the marketplace hums with softer voices and the clinking of coins. You feel a gentle calm settle over you, a reminder that even in the oldest cities, the simple acts of buying, selling, sharing food, and telling stories were threads weaving together human connection, much like tonight, here with you. The sun's last light fades, and you find yourself wandering down a narrow street lined with low, sun-baked houses, their doors flung open to welcome the evening breeze. This neighborhood feels quieter, less crowded than the market, more intimate. The faint sound of laughter and the clinking of cups drifts from inside one home where a family gathers. You step closer, drawn by the aroma of freshly baked flatbread mingling with the subtle sweetness of dates roasting over a low fire. The room is small, warm, and softly lit by oil lamps that flicker like tiny stars caught in clay bowls. Around a low table, men and women chat gently while children play with small carved figurines, animals, gods, and the occasional mythical beast. Food in ancient Sumer wasn't just sustenance, it was a language, a social glue that tied families and communities together. The staple was a hearty barley bread, dense, coarse, and usually unleavened. often paired with lentils, onions, and occasionally fish from the rivers. Meals were simple but satisfying, reflecting the rhythms of farming life. A mainstream historical fact. Evidence shows Sumerians brewed beer from barley and dates, and it was consumed daily, sometimes more than water, partly because it was safer to drink, and partly because it was, well, tasty and mildly intoxicating. An odd tidbit. Some recipes for beer were inscribed on clay tablets in poetic form, combining practical instructions with prayers to Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. One hymn asks her to make the beer foam like the Tigris and Euphrates in flood, blending artistry and utility in a way that would make any modern craft brewer nod in appreciation. Historians still debate whether these communal meals were purely domestic or had ceremonial significance. Some argue that even everyday eating was layered with ritual, reflecting social hierarchies and divine blessings, while others see it as a straightforward family affair punctuated by occasional festivals. You notice the family uses shallow bowls and reed mats for dining. There's a gentle passing of dishes, a soft murmur of gratitude before each bite, as if the act of eating is quietly sacred. A child offers you a small piece of roasted date, sticky and sweet, and you accept with a smile. Outside, a soft breeze rustles the palm fronds, carrying with it the faint echo of temple chants. The night is settling in, folding the city in a gentle embrace. Here in this humble home, the ancient world feels just close enough to touch. You rest your hand on the worn wooden doorframe, savoring this quiet moment, this pause in the grand sweep of history where life is simply lived, meals shared, stories told, sleep awaited. The night deepens, and you find yourself walking toward the riverbanks where the Tigris and Euphrates meet. A quiet place away from the city's clamor. The water's surface reflects faint starlight, shimmering gently as small fish dart beneath the surface. The cool night air smells faintly of wet reeds and earth, a calming contrast to the day's dust and heat. Here, under the blanket of the stars, you begin to consider how the Sumerians lived with nature's cycles. Their agriculture depended on the unpredictable flooding of these rivers, bringing both life and potential destruction. You imagine farmers and fishermen alike watching the skies and waters, relying on ancient wisdom passed down for generations. A mainstream fact, the Sumerians developed sophisticated irrigation techniques, including canals and levees, to control the floodwaters, turning wild rivers into managed lifelines for crops like barley and flax. A fringe detail you might find surprising. Some clay tablets suggest that Sumerians practiced early forms of environmental management, with rules about when and where to dig canals and plant crops to prevent soil salinization, a problem that still challenges farmers today. Historians still debate the extent to which these practices were consciously environmental or simply pragmatic responses to immediate needs. Some propose Sumerian scribes were proto-environmentalists in their own way, while others see these regulations purely as economic controls. Listening to the water, you feel the pulse of life that shaped so many generations. The river is a quiet storyteller itself, carrying fragments of the past in its gentle waves. Nearby, you spot fishermen hauling in woven nets, their movements rhythmic and steady. They pull up fish shimmering silver and gold, destined for the city's markets and tables. You watch as one man carefully selects a fish, then uses a small stone knife to scale it with practiced ease. You might find it funny that the same fishmongers who traded in the bustling market also had to rely on superstitions. Some carried charms made of bone or shells to ensure a good catch. Others whispered prayers to Enki, god of water and wisdom, asking for safe passage and bountiful nets. The scene feels timeless, the same quiet dance of human and nature playing out beneath the stars. The gentle lap of water and the soft murmur of voices create a lullaby that almost makes you forget the complexities of clay tablets and receipts. As you lean against a worn stone by the river, you feel the calm seep into your bones, the ancient world settling into a peaceful rhythm just beyond reach. The night's quiet hum follows you back toward the city, where the temple ziggurats rise like shadowy mountains against the dark sky. Their stepped terraces hold secrets whispered across centuries, and you can almost hear the echoes of prayers carried up those stone steps. Temples were the heart of Sumerian cities, not just as religious centers, but as hubs of administration and economy. Priests acted as intermediaries between people and gods, overseeing everything from grain storage to legal disputes. You imagine the low murmur of chants mixing with the creak of wooden carts hauling goods into temple courtyards. A solid historical fact. Temples controlled vast agricultural estates, managing harvests and redistributing grain to workers, families, and officials, making them key players in the ancient economy. Here's a quirky detail. Some temples kept detailed accounting records using tokens shaped like animals and everyday objects, pressed into wet clay or kept in sealed envelopes. It's fascinating to think these primitive receipts might be the great-grandparents of your modern bank statements. Historians still argue whether the temple economy stifled private trade or actually encouraged it by providing infrastructure and stability. Some see the temples as monopolistic giants, while others highlight their role in fostering early urban life and economic growth. Inside the temple walls, incense smoke curls in the lantern light, mingling with the scent of baked bread left as offerings. You catch a glimpse of a scribe carefully inscribing cuneiform on a tablet, fingers steady and deliberate. Their work preserves not just numbers but stories, laws, and even love poems, reminders that ancient lives were rich and varied. You recall earlier whispers of mythic creatures stamped on merchant seals. Within temple art, such beings appear again. Winged bulls with human heads, serpents entwined with lotus flowers, symbols of divine protection and power. They add a layer of mystery and magic, softening the sternness of administration. As you stand quietly, the temple feels alive with past and present, a meeting place of the mundane and the sacred. The steady rhythm of life pulses within its walls, a reminder that even bureaucracy can be, in its own way, a form of storytelling. With a final glance at the glowing ziggurat, you turn back toward the city streets, feeling the slow, comforting beat of Sumerian civilization fading gently behind you. The city's streets are quiet now, lit only by scattered oil lamps casting soft pools of golden light. You drift through a residential district where the houses are clustered close, their mud brick walls warm to the touch from the day's sun. The faint smell of baked clay and dried herbs lingers in the air, a reminder of the homes people built with care and routine. Inside one modest house, you catch the gentle murmur of a family settling down. The head of the household, an elderly man with a beard trimmed in neat curls, recounts tales to his grandchildren, stories of legendary kings and clever gods, woven with lessons about justice and kindness. His voice is calm and steady, a soothing cadence meant to ease their minds before sleep. A well-known fact. Sumerian families placed great importance on storytelling as a way to transmit culture, morals, and practical wisdom. Epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh weren't just entertainment, they were the bedtime stories that shaped young minds. Here's a curious detail. Some households kept small figurines of protective spirits made from clay or metal, placed near doorways or on shelves to guard against nightmares and illness, a kind of ancient nightlight, if you will. Historians still debate how widespread literacy was among common folk. While scribes mastered cuneiform, most families probably learned oral traditions rather than reading and writing, preserving their heritage through spoken word and song. You imagine the soothing effect of these nightly rituals, the gentle weight of tradition carrying the family through the dark hours. Children's eyes grow heavy as the stories wind down, the rhythm of voice and narrative weaving a soft cocoon of comfort. Outside, the breeze stirs palm fronds, adding a delicate rustle to the nighttime symphony. The city sleeps, yet the stories remain alive in whispers, ready to awaken with the dawn. You feel a peacefulness settle over you, the slow turning of the ancient world in harmony with your own breath, your own heartbeat. The tales, the rituals, the quiet care of families long gone, all come together now as a lullaby for your wandering mind. As your footsteps carry you away from the quiet homes and back toward the city's outer walls, the night sky above is a deep velvet sprinkled with countless stars, each one a silent witness to millennia of stories and dreams. The soft whisper of the desert wind drifts across the sand and stone, carrying the faintest echoes of voices long vanished. You think back on all the small moments you've glimpsed tonight, the careful engraving of the first receipts, the simple pleasure of a shared meal, the steady flow of river and trade, and the comforting pulse of stories told to sleepy children. It's a patchwork of daily life that, stitched together, forms the rich tapestry of ancient Sumer. A widely accepted fact. Sumer was not just the cradle of writing and cities, but also an intricate social web where religion, commerce, and family intertwined seamlessly. And here's a charming, lesser-known fact. Some Sumerian poems and songs reveal a playful side. There's a humorous hymn to the beer goddess, Ninkasi, that's equal parts recipe and ode, almost like an ancient karaoke tune for relaxing after a hard day. Historians still ponder whether the Sumerians fully grasped the long-term impact of their inventions. Did they foresee that their modest clay tokens and cuneiform script would one day evolve into the vast chronicles of human knowledge? Or were they simply doing their best to manage their daily lives with whatever tools they had? As you pause beneath a towering palm, the gentle hum of night settles deeper. Your breathing slows. The ancient world feels both distant and intimate. A soft, steady rhythm that invites you to rest. Let your mind drift now, carried by the river's flow and the fading glow of temple lamps. The stories and moments fold quietly into dreams, where time blurs and the past softly whispers goodnight. Sleep well, knowing you've walked through one of humanity's earliest cities, touched its pulse, and shared its gentle secrets. The past and present blend into a quiet lullaby, reassuring you that history is a gentle companion as you drift into sleep. Sweet dreams.